Connecting community through business, building relationships, and building Waterloo Region. 570 News presents Business to Business, powered by Save on Energy. Here's your host, Glenn Pelletier.
Welcome to Business on 570 News, powered by Save on Energy. And we are delighted to have with us a very special guest, the news director here at 570 News.
The esteemed news director.
Joe Pavia. And what are the odds?
Wow, I didn't think I was that special.
Both unawares. You both came in wearing purple shirts and black pants.
Yeah,
so.
we got the memo today. We're like twins, the Italian and Scottish twins.
Now we're not here though to talk about fashion. Thank goodness.
Or hairstyles,
because there is
Glenn.
no fashion.
Or hairstyles. Look at those two.
But there is election talk in the air, and it's going to get increasingly more noticeable as we move forward. The municipal election set for October 27th, and there's a lot to talk about. You, as two of you guys, as former city councilors, have a lot to say about the issues.
Everything.
But the landscape has changed a lot, and we're bringing Joe in to kind of help us set the scene for it.
Yeah, you know, Glenn, when I was looking at the stats from even the last election, I came out with more questions than really answers, or, you know, there is some perspective when I look at it. The one thing I found quite interesting was in 2010, and there was a debate between the regional candidates at the time. What were the main issues? There were two main issues. One was amalgamation. The second one was LRT. What are we hearing still now is the main issue? LRT. Mm-hmm. I can't believe that people are still talking about that 4 years later. It's still, how is that an issue when the shovel's been in the ground for I don't know how long? There's construction all over the place, but people are still incensed, and it's becoming that one issue that people are looking at. And this is how I'm going to vote. I'm against LRT, or I'm for LRT, so I'm voting for this.
Well, and I think Joe, you bring up a really good point. You know, those politicians or those candidates that are running across the region for various spots who are opposed to LRT and running on that principle that they would have voted against. Well, there's going to be no opportunity for them to do anything in reality. So what are they going to do when they get there? Because if they're just going to continue to fight LRT, which is, you know, probably for all intents and purposes a dead horse at this point. What then the electorate should be saying, well, okay, that's fine. That's your opinion on LRT, and I would have supported you there, but other issues are going to be important to the electorate as well. And what are those positions? And oftentimes we see a lot of candidates running who aren't fully rounded and don't have other issues of concern that are going to be principal and core to their campaigns.
Yeah, they need to be more of a Daniel Powder, who is a one-hit wonder with Bad Day. They need to move on that. What's the second hit? What's the second issue that you're going to work with? Especially with a lot of them, too, are maybe first time. They may have been part of a committee, or they may have joined some of the meetings that took place, and they maybe, you know, have certain issues at heart, but really, what is the core? If it's LRT, then what's next? What are you for? What are you against? What are you going to do?
I can remember when, you know, and Ian will share the exact same thing, you know, because we both served on local council, and, you know, there were probably more times than we want to count where our opinions maybe were different from the rest of the councillors, and, you know, really your job at that point is to try and get as much information that supports your position as you possibly can, and at the end of the day, if you couldn't convince anybody to see your vision and the democracy prevailed and the majority ruled and the vote went the way it is, I think, you know, both Ian and I would say, well, we got up from the table and said, well, we did the best we possibly could, but the issue's over.
And it often fell into you were rare. I was always right, but never in doubt. But you know, always on the losing side of a vote. But you know, I think one of the things that it is important is that those that are running actually do have really think through a variety of issues, because what ends up happening is we've got issues, and you mentioned LRT, because that's one that people are still talking about, but there's not really an outlet for what are you going to do. For us at the Chamber, it's always been, and some people are starting, many of the mayor's candidates talking about it's got to be on time, it's got to be on budget, it's got to deliver what it promised, because if it explodes out, it will impact other things. But the list of other issues that we're talking about at the Chambers, and I think people are talking about, arbitration. We've seen the fire settlements and the police settlements across the region. Infrastructure and what we're going to do, not just LRT, but the infrastructure as a growing community. Fair tendering is an issue that would, it was obviously part of the provincial election, but that's going to have an impact on taxes here and the ability to do things. The cultural issues and creative enterprise has been in the top of mind. But those are the issues that councillors, whether you're at a local or a regional table, are actually going to have to think about. So those are the things that I think are you not hearing on the radio about that?
Infrastructure, definitely, yeah. Of course, the pay issue that's been an ongoing story, but infrastructure, and that's something that's come across over the year with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, who have been encouraging provincially or federally. You notice that they have a voice now, and people are starting to listen. And then yes, we need to take care of our infrastructure, but then things start happening. I mean, the flooding last year in Toronto. All of a sudden, so wait a minute, we need to fix this. Now there's even flooding this week where we spoke to certain city workers who indicated, the infrastructure is in place for that one. The water is running slower so that, when there is flooding on a street, it will eventually drain away. But then, there's the other aspect, the other angle of infrastructures. And when we start getting into infrastructure, it's like, summer season. It's construction season again. There is that pain. So there is the good and the bad, definitely. But,
I think too.
Huge.
I think too when we talk about infrastructure, there's a little bit of a move afoot now. I hear it through some of the bureaucracies, and AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, has also talked about giving municipalities other taxing powers, and that's a slippery slope to go down, because now you're talking about part-time city councillors having the ability to implement other taxes other than property taxes, like sales tax increases or gas tax levies. But I think, given the state of infrastructure in the province of Ontario, and probably across the country and everywhere, something has to happen, because I think Gary Dyke, the CAO of the City of Cambridge, has told me that in 4 years, we're sitting at about $140 million infrastructure deficit. And we're talking about things that are under the ground that you don't see every single day, but that need the attention in order to be able to do the things above ground. Well, you can't do anything above the ground if you don't have the stuff working below the ground, and that's critically important. So there has to be a mechanism. So people that are running on local councils, they need to have some ideas around how are we going to accommodate the future growth of our communities from the perspective of that infrastructure, and find revenue sources, because you can't tax property that amount.
And that is really interesting. And I suspect not a lot of the people running that are new will have put their heads into that, because it's not something that people at the door are really
well, it's not sexy stuff, right?
Well, it is hugely important when you say, I want to put more in infrastructure. Well, okay, how are you going to pay for that? Are you going to raise property taxes, or how are you going to develop the relationship with the province and the federal government? I mean, just as we get into the election, Premier Wynne says it's great, federal government, you're out of deficit. We want you to increase by 4 times, up to $12 billion a year on infrastructure. The federal minister says we just got out of deficit. We still have. There's no chance we're doing that. You're divorced from reality. So you've already got the premier saying invest way more, the federal government saying no, we're just out of deficit, and then what you're left with is municipal politicians in between saying, yeah, we got these huge deficits. So the question about that they can really get their arms around are some things that can make a difference over time. Arbitration. But not many people want to take that on, because it's hard to be against firefighters and police officers. Fair tendering, it's hard to be on the other side of unions that can be very aggressive. But those are big issues that affect local taxpayers on property tax.
And a lot of those have to have keen and precise ideas on how you're going to attack from the provincial government level, because they're all provincially legislated items. The ability to provide the infrastructure money is largely provincially guided. And then when you get into fire arbitration, well, that's out of the hands of the municipality.
And
they can't do anything about it.
I still remember, one of the first times I talked to Ken Sealing, when I think I was just freshly elected. And I said, property taxes, everyone says it's the most idiotic way for municipalities to raise funds for what we do, for bridges or for parks and rec and streets and water and all those things. He says, yeah, that's true. And everyone knows that. but he said no one can get it done because the provincial government's not going to cede taxing power to municipalities. They're simply not going to do it. And for some of the reasons you talk about, first of all, it's power that they would give to municipalities. Second of all, most councillors, except for in Toronto, I think, are not full time, and it's hard to give really get your arms around all of those things when you're part-time. All
right, we're going to come back with 570 News Director Joe Pavia. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion of the looming election with an eye to the landscape. Who's out there, who's no longer a player. We're going to chat with one of them, who are no longer a player, Cambridge City Councillor, when the show continues. But we'll take a look at the political landscape locally with municipal vote of October 27th. Just 2 months away. You're listening to Business on 570 News.
We'll be right back with more Business to Business, powered by Save on Energy. Call in with your questions at star 570, 570-2545 or 1-800-570-5715. You're listening to Business, powered by Save on Energy, featuring local businesses, solutions, and success stories, connecting community through business on 570 News.
Welcome back to Business on 570 News. This segment of Business to Business is brought to you by Cowan Insurance, and our guest is 570 News Director Joe Pavia. And Joe, I know you wanted to pick up on something that we were talking about in the first segment.
Oh, I just quickly wanted to wrap up. We were talking about arbitration and fair tendering. Excuse me. When I think of arbitration, when I think of police, and when I think of fire, my question is to them: how much do you need? Maybe they need me as the arbitrator, and maybe I would just cost too much money. But as far as fair tendering goes, why do you need that much? I guess, there's two different point of views. When I report the news, it will be reported fairly.
And you know
when
what?
I ask the questions on business to business,
you bring up an interesting point about that, because, the trend of arbitration is once one municipality gets it, well, it's just a given for the rest of them. Yeah. I wrote an article the other day and said, now that Waterloo's got what they got, the firefighters, why would Cambridge even fight it? Because in arbitration, you're just going to have to give it.
But the whole point is, Waterloo gave what Kitchener had given, which Guelph got, which Toronto. So it doesn't matter. As soon as and they all follow each other.
Oh, sure.
And it's only a matter of time. And you know what? Why wouldn't you go to arbitration? Because you're not going to negotiate anything. Which is why when people say it's broken, it is broken. Mm-hmm. I mean, fair is one thing.
Yeah, because municipalities are now saying, just send it to arbitration.
But give us there's going to be some turnover on all councils. This is actually going to be for in many elections you have virtually no turnover whatsoever. But we already know, and you can give us a recap on each of the municipalities and how many new faces we're going to see.
Well, what I mentioned earlier too about asking a lot of the research I've done. There's a lot of questions, and I look to Waterloo, for example. So there's going to be there is possibly going to be a Dave who's elected as mayor. Let's put it that way. But I look at that and I think, wow, okay, so new faces. There's a few new faces in there, including the mayor, including is there one?
Just two councillors.
Two councillors are no longer running, correct. And I wonder what the impact of the new faces is going to mean for the group that established over 4 years. But, I look to Waterloo, though, and just over the years, there's been so much turnover where Waterloo Council is concerned. And you would be, as a former Waterloo councillor yourself, Ian, what I found it's interesting, even not so much in the councillor point of view, but since World War II, and maybe this is Wikipedia and it could be wrong, but there was another source that I double-checked this with, that mayors since World War II have only been in power for one term, except for maybe a handful. So we've got Brenda Halloran being one. And
Brian Turnbull did in the 80s.
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, it's been
Herb Epp.
Herb was, but he
was a returnee.
He was a returnee. Yeah.
He was a returnee, but he served one term, or actually 2 terms in those days, but they were only 1-year terms, and then went into provincial politics. But the recent history is absolutely that either mayors don't run again or they lose. So there has been a lot of turnover in the mayor's chair, and this time you've also got 2 long-serving councillors, Scott Whitmer and Karen Sean, that are Scott's not running and Karen's running for a regional seat.
Yeah.
So that's going to make Waterloo's regional councillor seat.
I think where the big difference in
interesting as well.
Waterloo is going to be, though, is in the mayor.
Absolutely.
Because, while the mayor is only one vote, and we all know that, and people got to understand that the mayor can't make arbitrary decisions necessarily. They do set the tone. And, your Waterloo, of course, and Kitchener as well, are going to have a new tone set. There's no question about it.
For sure.
So in Waterloo, there's a mayor's race and there's a regional council race. There's at least 2 new wards that are open. What about Kitchener?
Well, Kitchener, we've got so far 3 candidates with 6 first names. Go figure that out.
For mayor.
For mayor, running for mayor. Which first name are you going to vote for? That's going to be interesting, considering we have a rookie councillor, a longtime councillor, and a new person who is wanting to take a crack at it. They probably had their biggest challenge with the city of Kitchener in the 4 years ago, where it was expanded to 10.
10 councillors.
10 councillors.
So and a lot of new faces.
A lot of new faces. It would have been nice to have seen the momentum continue there, but So there's at least 2 open ward seats because Barry and Dan Glenn Graham are running. Correct.
And Carl's not going to be there. That's going to be a big hole for Kitchener Council to fill. And on their regional councillor seats in Kitchener, Jim Weidman is not running. So there's at least 1 open of the 3 Kitchener seats for regional council as well. So there's competitive races right across Kitchener as well.
Yeah, there was the one I was looking at, and this is for Waterloo, where Jane Mitchell, Karen C., and Sean Strickland are running. That is interesting.
That's going to be
that'll be a really interesting.
That'll be interesting. Race. Karen's a pretty strong candidate, and the
all
other
popular,
2 have been
all popular members of councils.
And so there's going to be competitive races for the mayor's chair in Kitchener and Waterloo, as well as the regional councillors. And what about the region? Obviously, there's.
Yeah, the region concerns me the most, and I guess I don't know how you guys sit on this, and I say concerns me because when you I don't know if you ever ask yourself, okay, who runs me, who rules over me, kind of thing in our own kingdom here. Is it the region or is it the city that you listen to? Who do you pay attention to the most? And, let's look at it in a bigger sense. Do you feel you're run by the province or do you feel you're run by the federal government? I would say most people would say provincially. I don't know. Maybe other people would differ. We'd love to hear from listeners on this. But I look at with the region with the big projects that are going on, especially let's go back to the LRT for a second, and it would be nice to see some familiar faces, mixed in with some fresh faces who have more than one agenda. Which we were talking about earlier, and who can contribute to what is happening across the region. Because to be honest with you, and it's not like I'm looking for fans from Cambridge or anything like this, but having lived in Cambridge, I think Cambridge has been ripped off in the region for years. And let's go back to, we can go back to early history or even recent history. Maybe Doug Craig is a fan of mine right now. But honestly, Cambridge seems to is the forgotten child in this region. And I think something seriously needs to be done about that.
I've had lots of discussions about as to why that is, but a lot of it is centered around geography.
Sure.
We don't live in Toronto, so we're not used to driving an hour to get to the other side of town. But in Cambridge, it's oftentimes a 45-minute drive to get up to Waterloo to a function or a meeting or whatever, and a lot of times that's not considered. When the vast majority of the population are in Kitchener and Waterloo, it's your 10 minutes or 15 minutes from
you know
everywhere.
what? If someone worked in Toronto where it would take me on a Blue Jay game on a Wednesday afternoon when they were playing, it'd take me 45 minutes to get out of the parking garage. I think we got it pretty good in the region of Waterloo, but
we do.
Let's leave the
not
Cambridge debate for another show.
No, and I'm not suggesting. I'm not suggesting that it's an unreasonable drive. What I'm suggesting is that it's just not. It's not the most comfortable.
No.
And I think that's where that perspective.
I think that's fair. But as far as regional council, and you identified there's a race in Waterloo that's going to be really interesting. It's quite possible that one of the 2 incumbents loses. I think you mentioned, Greg, and I don't know how you cobbled it together, but this possibility that you could have a 50% turnover on regional council. So where does that happen? I guess that's the mayors there'll be new mayors.
Well, potentially you got Cambridge. The 2 incumbents in Cambridge have not registered yet,
regional councils
and there's some question as to whether they will.
Yeah.
There's 3 There's two, for sure, popular candidates, well-known candidates. Councillor Carl Kiefer giving up his ward seat on Cambridge City Council, going for a regional seat. And Helen Jowett, who's chair of CTT, just coming off the chair of CTT. She's, widely known in the region of Waterloo. She could be a popular candidate as well. So,
but also the importance of the mayor's races. There'll be the region or the mayors of Kitchener and Waterloo are on regional council, so there will be two new regional councillors to begin with. You might have a new one in Waterloo at the at-large. You're
going to have one in Kitchener,
one in Kitchener for sure, possibly two in Cambridge. When you push that together, that's 7 of the, it's almost half, if not more. And that means that they're, to your point, Joe, you've got the LRT is decided, but there's still a lot of big decisions along the way about how to do it on time, how to do it on budget. What are the other things that the region should be focusing on as it relates to, we talked about infrastructure early. Are we going to talk about or talk with one voice about what the next thing we need to do in terms of infrastructure, in terms of how to build the community, and how does that relate between Kitchener and KW? So, I mean, there's going to be there'll be a new dynamic on all of these councils, as you say, because there's going to be new mayors, but in regional council, it's going to be different as well.
Yeah, when I hear the discussion that goes on about LRT and has been going on for the last 4 years in regional council, I often wonder, this is just me being a reporter, and I'm not being a Woodward and Bernstein or anything like that. But I do wonder. I do wonder sometimes, though. Okay, are we missing anything? Because all media, and I'm not talking just radio, but I see the paper, TV, will be focused LRT. Okay, is there another issue here that's probably bigger that we're missing that we don't know about yet? That's it's just an addendum to an agenda that we need to focus on. No, it's not a conspiracy. I just maybe there's other stuff going on. Maybe
I think that's an important one, and we're part of one right now. I mean, the economic development review that's going on about how we do economic development as a region. That the next council will be the one that's going to receive that report and make a decision about how we move forward on that. So, I mean, the issues that you talked about, I agree with you. I mean, the economic development, skilled immigration, family doctors and healthcare. I mean, in Cambridge, we got to get the hospital built, and that's going to fall onto councillors. We've talked about infrastructure, fair tendering, arbitration. All those are important. And you know what? I forgot. Wellesley Township is having Ross Kelterburn's retiring, so there's another new one. Yes. So I think it's entirely possible that you'll find new councils. There's Todd Cowan has got someone running against him in Woolwich Township. So there's lots of change coming, and
Rob
Deutschman as well. So there's going to be lots of change.
We can certainly do this again because the election's 2 months away. Joe, thanks so much for your time. It has just flown by. Joe Pabby was our guest, 570 News
Thanks
director.
For having me on.
We're going to have him back. We'll have him back in September.
Definitely
October.
talk about this again for sure. You're listening to Business, powered by Save On Energy on 570 News.
Business to Business, powered by Save On Energy, a presentation of 570 News. Watch the live video webcast at 570news.com. We'll return with more Business to Business. Just what you know. It's who you know. Connecting community through business. This is Business to Business on 570 News, powered by Save On Energy.
Welcome back to Business on 570 News, powered by Save On Energy. This segment of Business to Business is brought to you by Gallagher's Travel, and we welcome Cambridge City Councillor for Ward 4, Ben Tucci, to the program. Ben will not be running in the October election. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, sorry. So Ben, both Greg and I have been in your shoes before of having decided or having it decided for us that we're leaving City Council. What was the reason why you decided that you needed to take a break from politics?
Well, first off, I decided to move away from the ward council after 17 years. I wanted to step up to regional. But recent changes, I work full-time, and recent changes at my full-time position meant that the time commitment at my full-time job in Toronto is going to be such that it would have been unfair for me, and I'm pretty certain I could have won one of the seats, but it would have been unfair for me to take a seat and not be able to give 100% to it. So I'm 58 years old. It's not goodbye forever. It's just goodbye for 4 years.
Well, I think that, and Ben, it's Greg, of course. I applaud you, first of all, for your commitment and time and service to the community. And actually, I think from my perspective, I sit back and say, here's a guy who recognized that he couldn't give that commitment. And I think that's critically important. A lot of people don't put that into the consideration, and yet you don't feel like you're done with your contribution to the community. So we certainly look forward to the next 4 years. But all of that aside, come October the 28th, well, I guess officially it won't be till to December the 1st, but you're not going to be an elected official. You're going to be going through an election now where you're not having to put up signs and shake hands and kiss babies and do all the things that politicians do at election time. What do you think? How different do you think it's going to feel going through this one and being able to sit back and assess in a broader way who's running and who should get in and who shouldn't?
Greg, first I do want to say the decision was gut-wrenching and very emotional for me. It was bittersweet. Sweet, I guess, knowing that there's more promotion and responsibility coming in October in my full-time gig, but bitter because it meant for me leaving something that I've tried to build for 17 years. And, Greg, contrary to some people, real men do cry.
Now, so Ben, when you have as you look to the election in the fall, what are the issues? And we're talking, obviously, we've had Joe Pavillon. We're talking about all of the races across the region, whether regional races or the municipal races. But what's the theme of issues across the region that you think are going to play out as we look to the issues that will emerge during the election campaign?
Well, I think it's going to be the same themes you've had for years and years and years, and that is the ever increasing cost of living for people, whether you're a young family or whether you're seniors on fixed incomes. They want to make sure, because everybody's got their hands in people's pockets. The hydro rates are going up, gas costs at the pumps. So you want to make sure you have a responsible government, but responsible government doesn't mean, shutting the purse string and not investing in your community. A community that doesn't spend money on infrastructure or projects to move the cities forward is a community that will not have a bright future. So I think the themes stay the same. Potholes, my garbage being picked up, infrastructure, the cost of living. At the end of the day, need responsible government, but I think at the same time, people realize that if you're going to move your community forward, you sometimes have to make those big investments.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, 17 years on council. What are you most proud of as you look back on some of your accomplishments?
Well, what I'm most proud of, folks, is the fact that I have scars on my back. And what I mean by that is we had to make some very, very tough visionary decisions. And we got slogged along the way. I've got the scars to prove it. Mayor Craig has the scars to prove it. I'm very proud of being able to stand up and say, I was elected as a member of the board of directors of the city of Cambridge. I was elected to make the tough decisions. I am going to make the tough decision. I am not going to sit for a plebiscite. I'm not going to sit for a referendum. If I've made the wrong decision, you vote me out. If I've made the right decision, you vote me back in. So I think an overall theme for me is if I've got scars on my back, and it was sweat, blood, and tears to do what I did for 17 years, then I'm very proud of that. Anybody that comes out of this game, and Greg, you know this, anybody that comes out of this game saying, unscathed, is someone that's either A, didn't do the job, or I guess that's the bottom line. Didn't do the job, because you're going to walk away from this at some point having a lot of battle scars. But it's all worth it because we built a city in Cambridge. If you look at Cambridge, some of the things we've done, and it's still a lot to be done for the for the city to reach its full potential. But we did a lot of good things over the past 15 to 17 to 20 years.
I think that's what, what's interesting about political life, and, you of course, have lived it for a long time as well. that your popularity is at your peak the first time you get elected, and then your popularity kind of goes down because you can't please everyone, in spite of the fact you might be listening and trying to adjudicate based on the broadest interest, but the best interest of the community. You do get those scars on your back.
Yeah, and listening doesn't mean doing all things for all people. Listening means you've listened, you've weighed all the input, you've weighed all the options, the costs, that you've done your analysis, and at the end of the day, listening may well mean you arrive at a different destination, you arrive at a different decision. Arriving at a different decision doesn't mean you didn't have public consultation. It just means you listened and you've arrived after doing your homework. You've arrived at a different decision. And so, Greg, you're part of. Well, you're part of this. We're all what gets lost in people's view when they look at a politician is they look at them and say, well, they're spendthrifts and they're spending needlessly. They forget that the Ben Tucci's of the world are taxpayers in Cambridge. The Ben Tucci's of the world drive over the same potholes they do. The Ben Tucci's of the world raise their families in the same community. We have the same cost of living pressures. At the end of the day, it's almost as if as soon as you get elected, the politician grows horns and is a different animal. We're not. We're part of the community, suffering the same things, enjoying the same things.
Now, Ben, you were obviously considering running for regional council, not your personal platform, but what were the issues specific in the region as it relates to Cambridge that were making you feel as though that was the next step for you? So, I mean, because what we're trying in this show is to try and get at what are the issues that are going to emerge as the election issues for regional councils right across the region, whether it's Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, or the townships.
Well, yeah, I guess first and foremost is the relationship with the region. I bring a balanced business, social act to politics, and I'm 38 years in the business community, and I have a social slant when it comes to the people that need not the handout, but the hand up. And so I look at it and I say the relationship with the region has to be a strong relationship. At the end of the day, it's provincial legislation that formed a two-tier government is not changing any day soon. So I wanted to step up and bring that balance back to the relationship, because at the end of the day, our mayor, who's a strong mayor, can't do it alone. And this is not taken away from Jane Brewer or Claudette Miller. I think bottom line is we need a strong voice. We needed strong voices at the region, balanced voices at the region to rekindle the kind of relationship you have to have between the two levels of government if we're going to get things done. Because remember what I said, we've done great things in this city, but Cambridge hasn't reached its full potential, and we need our regional partners to help us reach that full potential. So for me, I looked at it and I thought there wasn't one specific issue. I mean, we can beat the LRT to death, but that train left the station. So now we got to find out, how do we maximize for Cambridge the return on that investment? Those are the type of things I was looking at. The social housing is a big issue, and I need to see the region. We need to see the region get more aggressive and trying to get people housed. There's long waiting lists for affordable housing, right. And we've got to deal with that issue. I think the two primary ones for me are relationship with the region, and the second part is the housing strategy. How do we get more people off the street or out of shelters and into homes that they can live with? They're clean and healthy.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today, Mr. Tucci.
Thank you very much.
And continued success. Ben Tucci was our guest, a Cambridge City Councillor for Ward 4, deciding that he is not going to seek re-election in October. You're listening to Business on 570 News.
We'll be right back with more Business to Business, powered by Save on Energy. Call in with your questions at star 570, 570-2545 or 1-800-570-5715. Strong Waterloo region. And when businesses support each other, they support the community. Now back to Business, powered by Save on Energy on 570 News.
Welcome back to Business on 570 News, powered by Save on Energy. And we are pleased to welcome Jeff Quint of Waterloo North Hydro.
Well, Jeff, thanks for coming in again. And we've talked in these summer months. We've talked about cooling and how that affects your thing. We've talked about lighting in general, about how that can affect your energy usage and your costs. And we've talked generally about how to get started in different sectors. But today, you actually brought in. You've got a little example of the new type of light bulbs. And this one is called a Philips Slim Style, but it actually looks sort of like a regular incandescent bulb. Why don't you talk today a little bit about the different types of actual bulbs, their costs, and the incentives or the rebates that you have through Save on Energy for people to start buying these when they go to their Home Depot or Canadian Tire or their hardware store?
Perfect. Yes, these ones I brought in today. This happens to be a Philips bulb, but there's many bulbs on the market, whether it's GE or Sylvanian. There's lots of products on the market, but these bulbs are catching on, and the prices are coming down. This one in particular goes for about $11.95 at Home Depot, and you can get an incentive on the spot with a coupon for $5 off. That's taking that product down to $6 or $7 right on the spot. $6 or $7 still seems like a lot of money compared to an incandescent or one of those small compact fluorescent curly ones, right? This costs about $1.26 a year to run.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's at 10.5 watts. If you had a 60-watt bulb, it would cost 6 times as much to run it. So you're looking at, $7.50. Within a year, you've almost paid this lamp back. How long does it last, though? We're talking 22.8 years. You put this in when your first child's born, they're going to be off at university before you have to replace it. You're going to sell the house maybe 2 or 3 times over. So these lights should last in the right applications for a long, long period of time. But that's what I emphasize is reading these boxes. And you can see on the one end, it's got almost like a nutritional facts section on the side of it. And it's called lighting facts. But in that is where you'll find a lot of information. And one of the catches we get all the time with LEDs, and it happened with the Christmas lights early on, is that there were this ugly, cool white.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody really liked them. Well, there's a little lighting scale on the side, and it goes from warm to cool. And there's some values underneath there. Ignore the values, but make sure you're looking for that color temperature that really matters, because that's what's going to make or break you at home. You're going to take this lamp home, and you or your wife or your kids are not going to like the use of this light just because of that. So a lot of times the LEDs got pegged in a market that, they had this ugly color to them, but it was just because there was a limitation in technology, and that's changed so much these days.
I think, too, Jeff, and you'd probably agree with this, the more people that start to buy these, obviously, that's why the price is starting to come down, because they were horrifically expensive when they first came out. But I think it's a no-brainer. I know at the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce we got encouraged by our local utility to take advantage of some of the programs and come over and have a look at our facility. And actually, we put in our boardroom a bunch of LED lights for spotlighting. First of all, that was 4 years ago, I guess. Never had an issue with any of them burning out, obviously. They got long life. But that, along with a lot of the other improvements, tremendous savings. Like, I couldn't believe less than half our hydro bill is now compared to prior to having Save on Energy folks and our Cambridge utility come in and have a look at what we could do.
No, and there's lots of opportunities. And with technology advancing, there are bulbs that respond to apps on your smartphone now, and they change color. So if you want one red and one blue, you can have that in a room just from your phone. So the technology has advanced so far on these.
Well, I think this is great. I've used some of these bulbs before, and you had to get a special one to be dimmable, and it was very, very expensive. And the cost this is amazing that, in 1 year you can recover your cost and from buying it, but it's going to cost you for that next 21 years a fraction of what a regular bulb would cost you.
Exactly. You always want to look long term when you're making an investment these
days.
All right.
Thanks for coming up, Jeff. Jeff Quint's our guest from Waterloo North Hydro. Always great to have Jeff on the program. And it was great to have Joe Pavia on as well to talk about the looming election. And we're going to have him back, right?
Yeah, I think it's critically important, especially if we, right after nomination day, September the 12th, now we figured that out, what day it is. And after that, of course, the slates are affixed.
Yeah, and I think that would be a good time to kind of go through and see who's running and where we think the races are going to be. You and I can have some gentleman bets on the side.
We're going to have some bets, and Joe's going to hold the money.
And what we're doing certainly in KW is, and I know you do video interviews, but we're going to have candidate sessions for the mayor's races in Waterloo, Kitchener, Woolwich Township, and the regional chair.
Yep.
And we'll probably also have the regional councillors that are running in Waterloo and Kitchener. So I think that will be a time when we can do a whole show on that, because now that we think about it, when you have the new 2 new mayors in the townships, 2 new mayors in Waterloo, possibly 2 new regional councillors in Cambridge,
half a regional council changing. It's going to be
more than half, potentially, and in fact, likely that you'll have, which will be. That'll be the first time that there's been big turnover on regional council in a long, long time.
Be like a coup.
I know it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic changes. So we'll look forward I think we should do that in middle of September. Yep. We'll have Joe back. That was great.
Can you envision the day when Ken Sealing is not regional chair?
No, he's showing he's a very, whatever age he is, he's very young, because he's been there for forever. And
I know.
He's got more energy than anybody I know, because there's no one that goes to more events than he does and participates in more things. So, but he seems to have the energy for it.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure his wife Kath will say at some point, enough is enough.
Yeah.
But I think certainly it's highly unlikely, no matter who challenges him, that he's not going to be there.
It's $150,000 campaign minimum.
Yeah, so I think that's the one I think is probably the safest.
All right, a couple minutes to go, guys. What do you got on your dockets?
Ian.
Well, we have our annual golf tournament at Grey Silo on August 14th. I think we're sold out on golfers, but we do have opportunity if you want to come and network at the cocktail hour and dinner afterwards, and we've got great live auction items on the August 14th. We're very pleased on August 18th. Federal Finance Minister Joe Oliver is doing a point of view luncheon speech for us, and so we're looking forward to hearing from him about, or as they start to signal what's next for the federal government as they come out of recession or a deficit, and then inspiring women in mid-September, where we usually have 650 women listening to 5 or 6 very wonderful speakers. So that's a busy start.
We got September the 4th. We got a breakfast session with Jim Brown, author of The Imperfect Board Member. That should be interesting. We also have our Fall Scramble on September the 18th. And our Women's Take Charge breakfast series continues on October the 14th with speaker Julia Biederman, Executive Dean, School of Engineering and IT and Trades at the Conestoga College. So that's a great program for women.
All right, and for more information on the various chamber activities, you can go to their respective websites, greaterkwchamber.com, that's greaterkwchamber.com, and cambridgechamber.com. Anything else to add, gentlemen? I think that's pretty much.
No, I think we're going to. This show is going to repeat a couple of weeks from now. Next week we'll repeat with Minto Schneider, and that because we take a couple of weeks off for vacation, and then we're right back at it for.
Although
we're
not vacationing, unless you are. Are you going away again?
Of course I am.
Are you?
I've got to stay. You browbeat me. I have to go on vacation somewhere in Ontario now, so I just to balance it out.
All right. Beautiful Woolwich Township is a great place.
I know, Woolwich Township. Yes. I think I'm going to go there.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure having you on the show and talking to you guys. The hour's just flown by. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Business on 570 News.